Hello and welcome to SBTV.com. I'm Susan Wilson Solovic. Today our guest is Janie Smith. She is the president of Smart Advantage, which is a marketing and management consulting firm. Her clients include mid-sized companies and Fortune 500 companies, and she consults with CEOs around the world. She's a popular speaker, and she's also the author of Creating Competitive Advantage. Welcome, Janie. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Now, first of all, entrepreneurship is on the rise right now. I think everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. But what are some of the common mistakes that you see startup businesses and early stage businesses making?
Well, there are a number, clearly. But one of the things is if you're going to get into business, you have to have a competitive advantage. Otherwise, you're in a playing field, you get into a commodity, you have no margins, and you can't be healthy. So think about, from the get-go, what's going to differentiate my company? And as I said earlier, it doesn't have to be a product or a service. It can be how you deliver it. Offer better terms than someone else. Offer better payment plans. Just something different that's going to make you stand out in the crowd. And the other part of that is very few companies, if they start a business and they say, well, I do have a competitive advantage and here's what differentiates me so I can go out there and knock them dead. One of the flaws related to that is they don't revisit it often enough. Competitive advantage is a moving target. There's no question about it that you absolutely positively have to have a review of this on a regular basis. That means, as small businesses are really guilty of this, we get so internally focused. We're looking at, somebody said it to me today, I had a presentation earlier and a CEO said to me, we're so focused on cash, and more cash, getting the business, getting the bills paid, and getting the cash in, that we forget to look externally. We need to constantly be looking at the customers, the changing landscape of what they need and want, and the competition and how that comes together relative to how we place ourselves.
I thought it was an interesting analogy you wrote about the Army exercise where they were shooting, and explain that.
Well, the Army exercise is you're shooting at the oncoming...
The snipers.
The
you were talking about two snipers.
And they're sneaking up on you behind you, and you're not looking. You don't have your head doing 180 degrees and 360. And you need to be looking 360 in this business world if you're going to stay alive and well.
A lot of the viewers who contact us or talk to us, they say, I want to start a blank business, and it's just a Me Too business.
Right.
And can that be successful, or?
Sure, it can be. As long as you look for ways to differentiate. And my favorite example of that is JetBlue, the airline that started a few years ago on the East Coast. JetBlue started, talk about commodity. Who wants to be in the airline industry? My goodness. Well, David Neeleman started that business, and I had the opportunity to interview him for the book, and I said, how in the world do you get into a Me Too business, a commodity business, and do so well as you did in the first few years? And he said something very interesting, and I love to quote him. He said, well, we come up with competitive advantages regularly, and how we do this is we get on the phone once a week with all our managers. Our managers have to fly the competition. If they have a business trip, they don't fly JetBlue. Once a week, we ask each other 3 questions. And every business, from startup on the way up, should be asking these 3 questions. They are, what do we do better than them, the competition? What do they do better than us? And how can we do that better than them? And if you're asking yourself those questions all the time, you're focused. And that's what he did. He came up with innovation after innovation in the early years and really made a good mark for an airline.
You mentioned an important word here, and that's focus, because so many early stage companies, because they're worried about that cash, they're wanting to be too many things to all people. Is that one of the problems that you see?
That is a tremendous mistake. Get focused on what you can deliver, as long as it's something the customer needs and wants. Sometimes companies will want to deliver something that has no meaning to the marketplace, but make sure that that's in alignment. And then the other thing to follow it up is make sure all of your employees, even if you have 2 employees or 10 or 50, all know your competitive advantages. I go into an organization and I'll have 25 employees assembled and I'll say, what's your number 1 competitive advantage? Do you want to guess how many different answers I get?
I can't even imagine.
25.
Probably, really.
And what does that say to the marketplace when there's no internal agreement? So if you have 2, 3, or 5 employees, make sure everybody can say the same competitive advantage, quantified the same way, so that message gets out there and people understand what you're really about.
And it needs to permeate throughout the organization.
Throughout the organization, 100%. And if it changes, everybody needs to be singing from the same hymnal at all times.
What are some of the other mistakes you see, Janie?
Well, one of them is in the planning process. I see lots of companies well, first of all, real small companies have a tendency to not do enough planning. They don't value the strategic planning process, and they should, because you need a roadmap. You need a map on how are we going to get there. And if you are doing a planning process, you must spend a significant amount of time evaluating your competitive advantages and competitive disadvantages, because therein lies the opportunity for operational decisions. How are we going to move going forward? How can we price ourselves based on these advantages? How are we going to position ourselves based on these disadvantages? Are these disadvantages insurmountable, or can we fix them and get creative and turn them into advantages? We need to be asking ourselves these questions all the time. And very few small companies take the time to do that, and that's the difference between the ones that last and the ones that don't.
They're too often just in that survival mode to sit back and take a big look at the big picture. But a lot of companies say to me, okay, I've done my planning, I did the strategic plan, but everything's taking longer and costing more than I expected. And what would you say to them?
I would say we all want a quick fix, don't we? You know, we're a society of instant gratification, but it is a process. And I have to say, for a small company, you don't need to do a weekend retreat. When I started my small business, I had a consultant come in. I spent all day one Sunday, and he helped me do my plan and my forecast. And for a small business, that's okay, but I had a roadmap. And clearly, every quarter, you're going to say, well, that's not even close to what I planned, and it never will be close to what you planned. But it gives you a place, a target, and you adjust as you go. And it's in the adjustments that you find out what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong.
I think that's one of the fears that small businesses have. If they write it down and they have this plan, that it's written in stone or concrete somewhere, and then that's what they have to do.
No, it's very fluid, but it gives you something to shoot for, and it gives you a measurement. Even if your forecasts are completely wrong, which, by the way, mine were, and most businesses are.
Absolutely.
They almost always are.
You don't have a crystal ball. You can't predict everything perfectly.
No, we make assumptions, and we're wrong about our assumptions, and I think that's one of the key things that comes back to a small business is what were the assumptions we made going in, and when we see we're wrong, how do we adjust those assumptions? And it's in the adjusting of those assumptions that gets us onto the next level and the next level.
Anything else we should be looking for? Any other mistakes we should avoid?
We should make sure that we have competitive advantages. We know what they are, all of them. I find a lot of companies don't know them. They'll know a few of them, but not all of them. They're buried, and they're buried in the deliverables, and that's what the book will help you find. And more importantly, make sure you communicate them ad nauseum. Everywhere your customer sees and hears about you, there should be a competitive advantage message.
Well, Janie, thank you very much for joining us. You've given us a lot to think about in terms of competitive advantage, and of course, you're the author of Creating Competitive Advantage, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
And thanks to all of you for watching us here on SBTV.com, where small business is our only business.